Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After you run you through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. So there's a lot to talk about in today's show. We'll start with this because it affects everything else we're going to talk about, and I think this is something that not a lot of people are paying attention to, but it's important for the entirety of the offseason for the Dolphins, especially when you look at the cap space. And some people argue against the Deshaun Watson move because of the cap space, and then obviously you might not have as much draft capital. So this is very important to all of those things. This first news story comes from Pro Football Rumors, and it is the NFL salary cap carryover. So what that means is if you all of the unused salary cap or cap space that you didn't use in 2019 carries over into this season, I guess it would be 2020, into the 2021 season. So the Dolphins have $15 million carrying over from 2020 to 2021. That's a lot of money. The Browns lead the league in that with $30 million, but the league average is around $10 million. And $15 million is a pretty dang good amount. So that's obviously really good news for the Dolphins. Okay, so let's see here. Let's go to this next news story, which is very interesting. This comes from Bleacher Report. Let me get you. Okay, this comes from Bleacher Report. It has been reported that the Dolphins are looking for a twitchy receiver to play in the slot. They are intrigued by Lynn Bowden Jr., but still are looking for a twitchy slot player. So this is a very interesting news story. I've been complaining about this. I complained about that all year last year. We didn't have a slot receiver. Isaiah Ford was the best thing we had, and even obviously he took a vacation to New England for a few weeks. Even he really wasn't that. And one of the things I want to highlight here is they said it in the quote in the report. I don't know who the heck they're quoting. It says they need to add a twitchy, or they're trying to add a twitchy receiver to play in the slot. So I think it's very interesting. Obviously, it's a huge need for the Dolphins. So I wanted to go down a list of receivers that could fill that role. So these are the 10 best receivers in free agency. And I want to kind of break everyone down here. So number 1 is Allen Robinson, and this is according to CBS Sports. So I mean, it's a pretty good list. So I would say these are probably the 10 best in free agency. So number 1 is Allen Robinson. We've talked about this, too much like Devontae Parker. Definitely wouldn't be a good slot receiver, and he's definitely not twitchy. He's a physical 50-50 ball guy. Not the best fit there. 2 is Chris Godwin. I actually probably would put Chris 1. Consistency issues worry me a little bit about Chris. He's more like Jarvis Landry than he is like Julian Edelman or Wes Welker or Cole Beasley. He's not a very twitchy slot receiver. He's a physical slot receiver. I still like him. I think he would fill that role perfectly. I don't know if he's a 1. I think he's a really good 2. And I don't think that would satisfy the Dolphins' playmaking needs if they just signed Chris Godwin. I think they still would need to draft someone in the draft if they decided to go down that route. So I think he would fill the slot receiver need, but I still think the Dolphins would still need to put pieces around Tua. Chris Godwin wouldn't just by himself be enough, in my opinion. Next is Kenny Golladay. I don't like Kenny Golladay. Really bad injury history. He's the same player as Allen Robinson and Devontae Parker. I would say he's a worse athlete than Devontae. He's a better athlete than Allen Robinson, but very similar player to those players. He's a good 2, and you can't really rely on him and to be healthy. So I think that would just be a terrible contract to take on. So he doesn't really fix that issue. Will Fuller, way too many injuries. Really, obviously wouldn't be a good slot receiver. He's more of a deep threat. Juju Smith-Schuster. I actually like Juju Smith-Schuster more than I do Chris Godwin. I think he's, like we just talked about, not a twitchy slot receiver. He would be a really good slot receiver. He's a really good 2. I don't think he fixes your playmaking issues at all. But he's way more consistent, way more durable than Chris Godwin. And I like the fact that he has a longer track record. And I think him coming into Miami as a physical, tall, bigger, really good hands, really good route runner in the slot, which I think he did a lot. He did that a lot in Pittsburgh this previous season, and I think he could bring that element to the Dolphins offense. And again, he's more of a physical slot receiver. He's not a twitchy slot receiver like Wes Welker or Julian Edelman or, some of the great slot receivers that are that way. He's more of a, like I said, Jarvis Landry, Hines Ward type than he is like a Wes Welker or a Julian Edelman type of a player. Curtis Samuel is another guy the Dolphins could look at. I don't like Curtis Samuel because I think he would fit the slot receiver role. I think we could probably use our money. He's not a bad player, but I don't think. I think we could use our money in other places. If it came to like, do you want Curtis Samuel? I don't know if I want to give Curtis Samuel a long-term deal. He's a really good slot receiver. He also has injury issues. He's very versatile. He played some running back last year because of Christian McCaffrey's injuries. But I don't necessarily think he's really high on my list. Right now, to me, honestly, the only guys so far that I would even consider if I was the Dolphins are Juju Smith-Schuster and Chris Godwin. But we have some more people on this list. Number 7 is Marvin Jones. I really like Marvin Jones. Very good athlete, good deep threat. He can play in the slot, which I like. Maybe not the quickest player to play in the slot, but he's physical. He's a good. He's everything that you want in a receiver. He's a really good 2 too. There's not a lot of good ones here. Marvin Jones is a good 2. I think he would be a great fit in terms of just adding a playmaker to the offense that gives you something different. I think Marvin Jones would be great, and he wouldn't cost you that much either. And he's very consistent throughout his career, which I like. Number 8 is T.Y. Hilton. I like T.Y. Hilton. I don't know if he's a good slot receiver. He's smaller, a lot of injuries, and he kind of seems like he's on the downslope of his career. So I'm going to have to say no to T.Y. Hilton. Number 9 is Corey Davis, who had actually a pretty good season. He had 984 yards. Now listen, is he going to take off? I don't know. He's a really good slot receiver. He's quick, he's twitchy, he's actually a bigger guy. He's physical. He's had some drop issues. He had 92 targets with 65 receptions, so he's had some drop issues. But I like his potential. I think he would be not very expensive, and I think he'd actually not be that bad of a move for the Dolphins. I like Corey Davis. He fits that twitchy mold that you need in that, and he's versatile too. You can play every position as a receiver, and he's a really good athlete. A lot of people compared him to AB, so that's kind of what you're working with here. He is very quick, very twitchy, and would be a good slot receiver for the Dolphins. And last is AJ Green. We really don't need to talk about AJ Green. AJ Green's old, and again, the same. If we got AJ Green, I wouldn't be mad about it, but he is very similar. And again, injuries all over the place. He is very similar to Devontae Parker. To be honest with you, he has the best 1 potential on this list. I would say him and Will Fuller and probably Juju Smith-Schuster have the best 1 potential to be like a number 1 receiver. I don't think Chris Godwin is that. And again, I think Corey Davis could become that, but we haven't really seen that from him. So if I had to rank them, I would say probably 1, to play the slot position, I would say probably 1, Chris Godwin, 2, Juju Smith-Schuster, 3, I like Corey Davis, and that's pretty much it. I don't really think there's anyone else. Those are the guys that I would consider if I was the Dolphins. Oh, and 4, I would throw Marvin Jones in there, but he wouldn't be a slot. He would be more of a playmaking addition than anything. But yeah, those would probably be my top 3 to fill that slot role: Corey Davis, Chris Godwin, and Juju Smith-Schuster. I think all 3 of those guys could fill that role really nicely. And Tua, those receivers would really, really, again, be helpful for Tua in the quick passing game because all 3 of those guys are good after the catch. Chris Godwin and Juju Smith-Schuster especially are really physical after the catch, and they're really good in the short passing game. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers did so well, was the short passing game this previous season. And I think he could add not only a great slot presence, but a good yards after the catch presence as well. And Tua excels in the quick pass game. And I think those 3 would help that aspect of our offense out a lot. So let's move on from that. The Dolphins, again, this comes from Pro Football Rumors, the Dolphins have extended kicker Jason Sanders. The Dolphins and Jason Sanders moved fast shortly after a report surfaced indicating the sides sought a long-term partnership. Adam Schefter of ESPN.com reports an extension agreement is in place. Coming off an all-pro season, Sanders signed a 5-year, $10 million deal, $10 million guaranteed deal. Overall, the deal is worth $22 million. So that's pretty good. What else can we say about Jason Sanders that hasn't already been said? He kind of had there was a point in this season where he hit kind of a cold streak. But other than that, he was immaculate, and he has been since he got here. I mean, he's been amazing. So thank God we've locked him up for the long term. Because, again, kickers are people too, and kickers are important, especially, December and November games when you need them to hit a kick. It's nice to have that guy that you know is going to be able to do it, and maybe can hit a hard kick in a difficult kick. And that's why he was named to the first team All-Pro status. Let's see here. This is a quick news story that I want to kind of just breeze through here. Mike Pouncey has retired from the NFL. And I just wanted to throw this out there. Mike Pouncey was great. I think his best season that he gave us was probably the unicorn season, even though that was kind of on the downslope of Mike Pouncey's career with the hip issues and all that other stuff that he had. He was a great player for us. It's unfortunate, if we could have found a quarterback in the early 2010s, that 2011 team would have been very good. It was a very talented team on both fronts. The front seven and the offensive line was very good that year. It's one of the reasons we won 6 games in a row that season. And if we just had a stable quarterback with Reggie Bush in the backfield and throwing to Brandon Marshall on the outside, and Anthony Fasano had a really good season as a tight end that year. And Charles Clay was also on that team. It was a younger Charles Clay, but he still made plays that season. And we had a lot of really good veterans on defense. The front seven was good. And I think we probably would have had at least a playoff. Definitely, not at least. We would have been a playoff team that year if we just had a stable quarterback. And that probably was his best team. His best season definitely was in 2016 as a team. It was definitely in 2016 when we made the playoffs. But I think 2011 was probably the best team he ever played on if it wasn't for the quarterback position. So, yeah, I just wanted to, Mike Pouncey was awesome. He had a good career here. Just wanted to kind of go through that really quickly. So, we have these next two. We talked about the coordinators last week. So, we don't have to talk about that this week. All right, let's talk about these last two things. Number one, I think this is important. Xavier Howard. This was reported from Bleacher Report, that if he doesn't get his extension or restructure, he wants to restructure his deal, he wants to be paid more money, he might ask for a trade. I don't really know what else to say about that other than, hey, he's a first-team All-Pro. He's very important to this defense. You want to invest in the secondary anyway. I don't think there's no way this doesn't happen if it comes to it. I feel like the Dolphins are gonna end up giving him the restructure and paying him even more money. So let's get to this last news story. I don't think you guys are going to have to worry about X leaving, in my opinion. I just think, like I said, the organization of Chris Greer and Brian and the way that they run their defense, and it was so successful this past season, is, like I said, it's just a lot invested into the secondary. So I don't know why you would give up a piece like that plays, a first-team All-Pro that plays in the secondary. I don't think you would do that, who's obviously in the prime of his career. And another thing that I want to bring up before we move on from the X topic, and I want to bring this up, Dave Hyde and Omar Kelly always bring up on the show, well, the Dolphins this was before we won 10 games. The Dolphins are years away from being a competitive team, which we know now that's not true. That's why you want to trade Xavier Howard and get even more picks. Well, no, you won 10 games this year. You want to continue to build off of that. There's no way you give up X now, especially after winning 10 games. In a season in which you had a ton of young players with no off season. So definitely keep that nucleus together. Do not mess this up like Adam Gase did and get rid of all, Juice, and really it was only Juice. I mean, who else did he give up that was a good player? I mean, it led to Minkah Fitzpatrick leaving because of the dumpster fire that he left us, but you don't want to give up that young nucleus, in my opinion. And especially since they they do invest in secondary so heavily. So let's move on from that. And again, my final opinion on the X thing is I don't think he's going to leave. But let's see here. This last news story, before we get into some other things that I want to talk about that is surrounding the Dolphins, is Deshaun Watson took a picture with Raekwon Davis and Christian Wilkins. Obviously, Christian Wilkins was a teammate of his, and he played against... I don't think he played against Raekwon Davis. He might have. I think he did, maybe. But obviously not. Raekwon Davis, Alabama player. They had a dinner, but the thing that's interesting to me, this is obviously at a dinner in Miami that they took this picture. First of all, the fact that they took the picture when they know, all of those people there know that the rumors with them and the Dolphins. That doesn't worry me. It actually makes me excited because I don't know. This is just seems to be, and it's not even being talked about that much. But his agent was there. I think that's the important part of the story is that his agent was there in Miami having a dinner with Dolphins players and Deshaun Watson. There's no way they didn't talk about anything like that. And I think something that isn't being talked about enough is that he does have a lot of ties to that organization, to the Dolphins organization. And I don't know. It just seems like it just seems kind of inevitable in a weird way. I don't know. It's just a feeling I have. And again, there was photographic evidence of this dinner taking place. But I don't know. It's just I thought it was an interesting story. I don't know what else to say. We've said all we've had to say about Deshaun Watson on the show. I don't really care what he ends up doing because either way, like I said in the last episode, the Dolphins, either path that they take, they're going to be successful in my opinion, which is a cool kind of predicament to be in. It's like it's kind of a win-win situation if you're the Dolphins. You either go down the Deshaun Watson road, you're going to be successful. You go down the Tua road, you're going to be successful. So whatever they decide to do, I don't think is going to lead to losses or another 10 years of being bad. I don't think I don't think that outcome is possible with either road they take. So it's whatever happens. I don't care. I've not been on Google's, constantly, or even on Bleacher Report, constantly looking at some of the things that are happening. And again, the trade could happen before, obviously, March comes around. And it could happen well after March. Hopefully that doesn't happen. It definitely has to happen before the draft. I do think that. And whoever gets him, gets him. I don't really care. Teams like the Broncos, the Panthers, the Jets are reportedly out because Deshaun Watson doesn't want to go there from some of the things that have come out in recent weeks. And if you look at the competition, even if you throw the 49ers in there, I feel like the Dolphins and Texans, that's the best for both sides. It's really good for Deshaun Watson, and it's really good for the Texans if they do that deal. So, and again, to bring this up before we move on from this news story, is Chris Greer has a lot of connections to that Houston organization. A lot. So, and they've obviously made trades in the past before. So, I don't know. It's just a lot of these things are kind of coming together, and eventually, I think it just kind of feels like, I think this is probably going to happen. This next news story, it's not a news story. This is some things I want to bring up. Some underrated players that could make a huge difference on the Dolphins that I don't think a lot of people are talking. Some of these players people have talked about, but I think it's some interesting stuff that hasn't really been talked about all that much, I guess. But so the first, I just want to look at some free agents and potential free agents that could change the Dolphins and really affect them in a positive way. So the first one I want to talk about is J.J. Watt. So J.J. Watt, obviously, I think would be a great fit on the Dolphins. The Dolphins need a front seven difference maker. He not only would he be a difference maker in the passing game, but he would be a huge defensive presence. And I think this is where I really want J.J. Watt for this. He would really help us on first and second down. He could dominate. I don't even care if he gets 6 sacks, as long as he's like if he's helping us get into third and longs consistently. There's no way we won't repeat. And not even just repeat, but be the best defense in the NFL. We will be the best third down defense. I think it helps Brian be creative and Josh Boyer be creative in some of the things that they do. Not that they're not creative anyway, but I think it helps them put them in more favorable situations that they want to be in. And a game like the Denver Broncos last year where they ran the ball down our throat can't happen again. Because I think J.J. Watt and people like Emmanuel Ogbah and Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis being better in his second season, and the fact that J.J. Watt not only can play defensive end but defensive tackle, he can really help us get teams into a first and second long, and that's where Brian wants them to be in. And I think he can help us win a lot of games if he decides to come over. I think that would be a huge benefit. And he's a really good scheme fit. I think he could do stuff like what Dante Hightower does for the Patriots defense in years past, and what Lawrence Guy and Vince Wilfork and Seymour did for that defense in the past, where they just get teams in those favorable third and long situations. And that's why New England was so good on third down defensively for so long. And I think the Dolphins just need one more guy like that. And I think J.J. Watt would fill that role perfectly. And it's good for J.J. Watt, too, because I feel like this team is going to be competing. Depending on how good Tua is this upcoming season, I don't want to see competing for championships. And we still don't know what the Dolphins are going to do offensively, because they still obviously have some issues there. I don't want to see competing for championships, but definitely after, I would say within the next 2 years, there's a pretty good window there for that. I think J.J. Watt could help this defense be not only one of the best in the NFL, but dominant, like really good. And obviously that would help out a young quarterback as well. So I think J.J. Watt is a big yes for me. I really hope that happens. I don't think it will, but I think sorry guys, it's cough or sneeze. I think it will. I don't think it'll happen, but it would be great for the Dolphins, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What else do we have to talk about? And I think he's a Chris Greer guy, too. And I think he's a Brian Flores guy. He's a great leader. And that's something a young team needs. And, if we lose Fitz, obviously we still have Van Noy on defense. But J.J. Watt would be good for just the organization and everything. And he would be going to a great defense, too. So let's move on to... There's two more guys I don't want to talk about. The second guy is Von Miller. Von Miller, I don't really have to make an argument. Everything we just said about J.J. Watt, getting us into favorable down and distances, not only does he do that, but he's a dominant pass rusher. So he's going to get his 10 sacks. I think Von Miller would elevate the defense to insane heights if the Dolphins got him. It would be insane. I think if the Dolphins, let's just say this. Let's say the Dolphins right now just added Von Miller onto the team. This team would be a playoff team. I think the defense would be top 5. I don't think they would even have to change. They could just skip the draft, go right into the season, and just they would just be so good on defense, because that's the only missing piece. I know a lot of people want to bring up the middle linebacker position. Even that wouldn't hold this team back. Jerome Baker and some of the guys that we have on the roster right now are enough. Von Miller would just push the boulder over the hill, and it would just be gravy from there. I think Von Miller would make that big of a difference. Von Miller is one of the greatest players of the last 10 years. And I still think he has a lot of juice in the tank. So Von Miller would make a huge difference on this team. And like I said, he would do everything J.J. Watt would do, but also he would be a playmaker in terms of the pass. Not only does our secondary great, but people like Josh Allen and some of these other players, and some of the creativity with what we do with our defensive fronts and stuff like that, and the creativity of Josh Boyer and the game planning of Brian Flores, if you add all of those things up, it would be just greatness. And I think it would be a great fit. So, yeah, I love the Von Miller. That's a big yes for me. Both of these are big yeses for me. I think that both of these would impact the team a lot. And the last guy I want to talk about is Stephon Gilmore. Now, we've heard a lot of chatter coming out of New England that for a long time here, the last 2 years actually, that Stephon Gilmore is on his way out. Stephon Gilmore is on the way out of New England, which would be great for us because New England would be way easier to beat. But not only that, J.C. Jackson is a free agent, so we could actually kind of add these two together if I wanted to. But let's just focus on Stephon Gilmore or J.C. Jackson, whoever. It's pretty much interchangeable. Because of what we're about to talk about. I think if you add Stephon Gilmore or even J.C. Jackson, not only does it weaken New England, but they're going to the same scheme that they're very successful in Miami. And I think if you have, and I know people are going to go crazy over this, can probably disagree with me, but if you have Byron, and I know this is a lot of money to the secondary, or Stephon Gilmore or J.C. Jackson, which Stephon Gilmore would be cheaper than J.C. Jackson in my opinion. But whoever you add there, that slot position, I think also catapults this team to new heights, and this defense would be crazy, crazy good. And, Kyle Van Noy said something else before, and again, these are just players that I don't think, especially Stephon Gilmore or J.C. Jackson, I don't think a lot of fans are talking about, but I know a lot of fans will look at it and be like, it's just a little much. It's just a little much, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with that because of what happened in Buffalo, but I think it would help out a lot, and especially in that slot position if you had those three. And you got to take into account what scheme the Dolphins play. But anyway, I'm getting off track here. I don't even know what I was about to say. I have no idea what I was about to say. I just lost my... hold on. I lost my train of thought. Oh, these are players... Again, I just feel like... not necessarily I want the Dolphins... I would want the Dolphins to actively go out and get J.J. Watt and Von Miller. If the Dolphins tomorrow announced that they signed Stephon Gilmore or J.C. Jackson, I think it would still help the team out a lot. So, again, these are just players that I wanted to bring up that I think could drastically help the team. And notice they're all defensive players. But... Again, these are players that I don't think a lot of people are talking about because we constantly are talking about the offense, but I think these three players could make a big difference. And I didn't even throw in what's his face, the tackle from the excuse me, guys, I had to sneeze. The tackle from the Ravens. He can make, I guess, a little bit of a difference because he could play guard. But I think those three would make a huge difference. So let's move on from that. I think that's all the news. I feel like I'm forgetting something. I don't know what we talked about Jason Sanders. We didn't talk about the Durham Smythe situation, that he's looking for an extension, and that looks like it's going to be done in the near future. Jerome Baker is obviously up for an extension. It seems like he's going to get his money, and again, with that rollover, that $15 million added on to, I think, the $30 million the Dolphins already had, which is big. So if they did trade for Deshaun Watson, or if they wanted to get J.J. Watt, or if they wanted to get Von Miller, if they wanted to get Stephon Gilmore, they could still do that. And have space left over for other additions as well, or extensions, and so on and so forth there. So let's move on, I guess, to the fan Q&A. Let's get into the fan Q&A. Okay, so this first question comes from Brandon. He says, if you were to solely focus on building the O-line this offseason, how would you personally do it? How realistic is this scenario to happen, in your opinion? Just solely build the offensive line is 0% chance. Maybe they add one player, but I don't think... I mean, the Dolphins did that last year. They invested a lot into the offensive line. When you think about Austin Jackson, Solomon Kinley, Robert Hunt... who am I forgetting? Austin Jackson, Solomon Kinley, Robin Hunt. Solomon Kinley. I think I just said that. Anyway, the point is they invested a lot. Eric Flowers, Ted Karras. Like, they invested a lot in that offensive line. I don't think, especially with those young players, maybe the center position is addressed, but especially with all of those young players, I don't think they're going to do too much on the offensive line. So I would say it's not very realistic. And to be honest with you, I don't really see a scenario where I would do that. I like a lot of the players we have already, so... on the offensive line. Again, they're young. They didn't have an off season. They showed a lot of promise. I think you got to stick with them at least one more year. And again, you might add one more player, but I don't see a drastic change there. This next question comes from Beef. He says, hey, Skaggs, I know there's a lot of excitement around the table from Penny Sewell, Soul, but I heard that he opted out this season, and there is a possibility he did not work out all year. Is that a red flag in picking him in the draft? Yes, that is a red flag. I don't know if the working out part is, that's a huge red flag. And it is, it's a little worrisome. Some of these, maybe not Jamar Chase, but some of these other opt-outs, it's a little worrisome. But I don't know, if it's the whole thing of him not working out for an entire season is true, and again, another off season, that's a lot of time off. Yeah, I think there's a little worry there, and especially since you don't know how training camp's going to work out, that could hurt his draft stock a little bit because of some of the rust. But if you're talking about just as a prospect, I don't think it hurts him that much. The working out thing does, though. That's a problem. This next question comes from Beef. He says, hey, Skaggs, is it an unimportant question? This isn't an unimportant question, but I would like to know what your opinion is of the treatment of the Lombardi trophies that Brady and Gronk have shown. Do you think they can do whatever they want, or are they just showing disrespect to it? Not only to the creators, but those who worked hard to get it and those who haven't. Just want to know your opinion, and I know it rubs some people the wrong way. I don't think if it rubs you the wrong way, I don't understand why. They're happy. Listen, no, I don't know how it shows disrespect to the trophy either. I mean, the Stanley Cup, what they pour beer in it and everything, and I don't think that's. I think that's a sign. It's like you're just hanging. I mean, if you won the championship with your best friends, like I think that's how that kind of would go down. I think that's a good thing. They're the only reason they're that happy is because they just won the championship. I think that's the most important thing. Is they're happy, they're having fun as a team together. I don't think it's disrespectful. I don't think it is any of that. I think it's fun. I don't know why so many people freaked out about that. I thought it was cool. And again, one thing I will say about that before we move on is like I just don't care. Like if the Dolphins won a Super Bowl tomorrow and they were throwing they're out there in Miami Beach and they're throwing the dang trophy back and forth. I think everybody would think it was cool. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's just we won a championship. We're happy. That's what that says to me. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "Hey Skag, excuse me. Hey Skaggs, nice presentation, by the way. Just want to throw this out there. What do you think of the rumors of Rob Gronkowski to join the Dolphins? Absolutely false. And this just goes to show you how little people have to talk about. There's not a shot on the planet Earth, and Gronk has actually said this publicly that he would not play for another team if Tom Brady isn't on it. So no, this is not going to happen. And I don't want Gronk. I like Gronk as a he's still an elite front seven or on the line of scrimmage player. He's very good in the run game, and he's still really good at pass protecting. So, and that's one of the reasons New England was so good at running the ball for so many years, is because of him. He's always been that way. So, if you want Gronk for that, fine. I don't necessarily think the Dolphins need it, though. They have Durham Smythe, who is good enough at that. This next question comes from Robert Young. He says, what defensive free agent would you target, assuming we go off first 2 rounds? Thank you. We talked about it earlier in the show with Von Miller, J.J. Watt, and like Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson. I think those are the best defensive players the Dolphins could go after. And I think it's a good contrast to the offense, the draft this year. I don't think the draft is necessarily the most talented when it comes to defensive players. And if you look at free agency, I think the defensive players are better than the offensive players. So it's a good little kind of combo if you kind of go that direction and then in free agency and then draft a receiver and a running back in the draft. I think those two complement each other really well. And another thing I want to bring up, when you look at the receivers list that we just named earlier in the show, the top 10 receivers, there's no one in that list that I would take over Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase. There's no one on that list I would take over them. So I think that kind of gives you kind of some kind of perspective of the draft and free agency, where it's like, I would rather have J.J. Watt and Von Miller or J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore than I would have Juju Smith-Schuster or Chris Godwin or who else did we talk about? Corey Davis. Like, those players are way better than them. Like, J.J. Watt, Von Miller, and Stephon and J.C. would make a bigger impact on the team. So, like I said, I think the free agency and the draft really kind of meld well together because they're stronger. Their strengths are in other areas, and I think those two could complement each other really well if the Dolphins decide to go down that route. This next question comes from Richard. He says, what about Marcus Mariota if the Raiders cut him as to his backup, or Andy Dalton, or Blake Bortles? Definitely not Blake Bortles, but I would say, Marcus Mariota is great. If Marcus Mariota was cut, then yeah. He's probably the best backup in football, and I know people love Fitz, but Marcus Mariota is he's a very good backup for sure. He's a solid starter in the league, in my opinion. If you had a good team and you had Marcus Mariota as your quarterback, you can make the playoffs. That's for sure. This next question comes from ABK. He says, Skaggs, this offseason, one of our positions of need to improve is the defensive tackle position. How do you think we could address it in draft or free agency, or just simply re-sign Devon Godchaux? J.J. Watt would be a good one. Like I said, he could play pretty much any position on the defensive line. To answer your question, T-Zone, I'm not really familiar with all of the defensive tackles that are free agents, or even in the draft for that matter. But I don't think. I mean, defensive tackle. I would just re-sign Devon Godchaux. Maybe you get some depth later in the rounds in the draft, or you sign someone who's kind of solid player that's a good rotational guy in free agency, but I don't think it's that big of a need. I don't think that's something that the Dolphins necessarily need to get a high price guy for. This next question comes from Casey Fanatic. He says, I believe we are good with our present slot receivers, Albert Wilson. It would save $3 to $4 million by cutting him, and he has battled injuries. Your thoughts? That's a very weird question. You said, I believe we are good with our present slot receivers. Albert Wilson. Slot receiver Albert Wilson. It would save $3 to $4 million by cutting him, and he has battled injuries. Your thoughts? No, I don't think Albert Wilson is necessarily the best slot receiver. He's more of a playmaker than he is a great slot receiver. He's a great run after the catch player. I just don't necessarily think he's the best chain mover in the world. Like if I had to say who do I want on 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 7, Juju Smith-Schuster or Albert Wilson, I think we all know where we would vote on that, or Chris Godwin or even Corey Davis. Like I think we would all kind of pick them over him right now. So I don't know if I think the Dolphins are right in their approach to being like we have to get to as many things as we can. So, and I think that's a good idea. This question comes from SM. He says, Mac Jones at 18. We need a backup. Do we not? No. No, do not do that. This next question comes from Adrian. He says, hi, fellow Fins fans. Keep up the great dialogue. Okay, thank you for saying that, Adrian. This next question is, I think this is an actual question from Adrian. He says, hey, Skaggs, agree or disagree with any of my with this offseason scenario? Free agency. If they can finagle the salary cap, pursue Moten Samuel and Marcus Williams, maybe they can squeeze Milano from the Bills. Okay, that's actually not a bad one. So you're saying Taylor Moten, Curtis Samuel, Marcus Williams. That's not a bad group. That's a pretty good group. Safety position, slot receiver, tackle. It's not bad. Maybe they can squeeze Milano. I'm assuming you're talking about the Bills linebacker. I didn't even know he was a free agent. Yeah, I like that. It's a good one. I like that scenario. Draft, trade down, pick best available in order. Wide receiver, edge, running back, center, linebacker, DT, nose tackle is what he meant to say. Defensive tackle. Running back and slot. So draft, trade down, pick best available in this order. So you would take a receiver first, an edge second, a running back third, a center fourth, and a linebacker fifth. A nose tackle sixth, and the 7th round running back or slot. So I would put a premium. I like that you like edge. And that's something I would change in your free agency list, is like prior to it, like if, you know, and I know that some of these guys are a little bit under the radar guys that would be good contracts. Like some of these guys would not be that expensive, which is not what I like about your list. But I think you can target some edge players in free agency and mix them in with the draft. I think there are some good edge players in free agency that I think are better options for the most part, more than some of the options in the draft. So I think I would take edge out. I don't think edge is a second priority in the draft. So I would take that out. I would move up a playmaker on offense, whether that's a center or a running back or a receiver. I think that has to be moved up. And I know that seems a little excessive, but I think it's a huge need, and I think it would be a good idea if the Dolphins were to do that. This next question comes from Andrew Adams. He says, are you surprised at how cheap Carson Wentz came for Indy? Early on in the season, Fitzpatrick said that there are throws Tua can make that he can't, but we hear, this question is, I don't know if this is from Andrew, but we hear a lot about Tua's lack of arm strength and inability to throw on a rope. What types of throws do you believe Fitz was referring to? What did he say? What did Fitz say? Are you surprised? Okay, Fitzpatrick said that there are throws Tua can make that he can't. Okay, but we hear a lot about Tua's lack of arm strength and inability to throw on a rope. What type of throws do you believe Fitz was referring to when referring to Tua? Okay, I would say probably the short to intermediate stuff, and I would say the things that Tua is going to be better at than most quarterbacks is his decision making. And I know that's something Tua said he needs to work on. But he's really good at making fast decisions, in my opinion. It's something he did really well in college. So in terms of throws that he can make that Tua can make that Fitz can't make, I would probably say it's mostly in the short passing game and maybe some down the field stuff. And I would say some throws on the run. I think those are some throws that Tua can make that Fitz can't on the run. But other than that, I don't know. I would say most of those things that we just discussed. This question comes from Mark. He says Chase Smith or Sewell or Deshaun in free agency. Chase Smith. Chase, you mean Chase Smith? I don't even who the heck is Chase Smith. I don't know who Chase Smith is. Chase. Oh, you said Chase Smith or Sewell. I thought you said Chase Smith. Sorry. So Chase Smith or Sewell or Deshaun Watson in free agency. Who the heck is Smith? Oh, Devontae Smith. I don't know why I'm all over the place right now. Oh, Deshaun Watson. That's not even a debate. Not even a debate, Mark. It's not even close in my opinion. So yeah, that's it. That's gonna close out the show. I hope you guys enjoyed. I feel like maybe we went a little faster. There just wasn't as much as I thought there was. We only did about 40 minutes. Usually we do about 50 minutes. And this episode took a while to get out, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think we talked about a lot, and hopefully a lot starts kind of popping off. I mean, this next month is going to be crazy. And I think we're going to break down even more positional groups on next week's episode, which I'm excited to do. I probably could have fit another one in here. I just didn't think it was going to be this short of an episode. So I am Skaggs83. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.